11:15 this morning, horror dawns on Golders Green. An attacker runs towards a man. He's carrying a knife. You can see him here, weapon in hand. The men in this car see the knife all too clearly and try to warn people. Move, move, run, run, they shout. Footage put on social media shows an older man standing at a bus stop before the attacker lunges at him. The men who filmed this and told people to run said the bus stop victim didn't seem to hear them in time.
The old man was in the bus stop waiting, and they told him about this, but somehow either he didn't listen properly, because maybe he's an elderly person who either, so he must probably didn't hear a person. So, and they continued, and as they continued, they literally went out of the car to try and confront him.
אבל בגלל שהוא ראה אותנו מההתחלה שאנחנו רודפים אחריו, אז הוא בא לקראתנו, וכאילו...
So basically, because they're saying that because he knew they are following him, he literally went towards them with a knife.
What was his demeanor? How did he seem to you?
You could see that his all anger was just to stab someone.
2 men suffered knife wounds, aged 76 and 34. They're in hospital. This is the moment police catch up with the suspect. He comes at them, knife raised. They discharge a taser. On the ground, he doesn't want to let go of the knife. The Met say the officers thought he also had an explosive device. He's handcuffed and arrested on suspicion of attempted murder. Members of the public and volunteers from a Jewish security group helped detain the man.
About 5 weeks ago, we were standing in pretty much the same spot where there was an arson attack here on the Jewish community with our Toller ambulances. Here we are today. We get a phone call to our hotline, to Shomrim hotline, saying there's a man running around with a knife.
After a string of attacks on Jewish charities and 2 synagogues, people here told us they feel under constant threat and unprotected. The head of the Metropolitan Police, Commissioner Mark Rowley, had an angry reception here.
Shame on you! Shame on you!
Bring more police security here. Actually bring the police here. The police was here for a week, not more than a week.
Unfortunately, insufficient measures are being taken to protect them. There have been many, many wake-up calls, many warning signs, and they are justifiably and understandably upset.
Commissioner Rowley revealed the suspect has a violent background.
The 45-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder and remains in custody following a checkup at the local hospital. He has a history of serious violence and mental health issues, and that investigation continues.
Tonight, the Prime Minister said this anti-Semitic attack was an attack on Britain.
My thoughts and all of our thoughts are with the victims, their families, and their loved ones. And let's be frank, this is not an isolated incident. There have been a series of anti-Semitic attacks, and I know firsthand the anxiety that is causing in the community.
But there has been severe criticism of Keir Starmer from Israel. The Foreign Ministry said anti-Semitism is festering across the country, and the government can no longer claim it is under control. And the chief rabbi has called for meaningful action. He said after today, words of condemnation are no longer enough.
Well, today's attack in Golders Green follows a series of incidents in recent weeks targeting Jewish sites. These include Jewish community ambulances set alight in Golders Green last month and an attempted arson attack on a synagogue in Finchley 2 weeks ago. Our Home Affairs correspondent Simeon Brown is in Golders Green. Simeon.
The video of the attack here is absolutely chilling, but even before that attack, there was already concern about growing anti-Semitism that appears to be intensifying this year with attacks on Jewish places of worship and attacks on Jewish people. I mean, let's just look at a few incidents that have happened in this area alone in 4 weeks. In March 23rd, you had 4 Jewish ambulances set ablaze. April 15th, petrol bombs thrown at a synagogue in Finchley. Days later, a man set fire to a property with links to a Jewish charity, and there was a further attempt on another synagogue launched days later, and now today. Now, we cannot speculate on the motivation of the attacker. Proceedings are active, but past police briefings have warned about two distinct drivers of attacks. First, radicalization, and secondly, foreign states deploying UK-based proxies to carry out attacks here, often for pay. And what those briefings said was that when there is intensifying conflict abroad in Israel, the cases here also intensify. What has been complicated in this incident, though, is that an Iran-based jihadist group has claimed responsibility, although that has been unconfirmed. What is different here, though, is that this has been declared a terrorist incident. The question is, what happens now? Just ahead of me, there is a protest. People here are angry about the intensity of the increasing frequency of these attacks. And what is scary is that there is a mutation. Earlier, when I was here last month, I was here for an attack on a property. Today, there's been attacks on people.
Simeon Brown in Golders Green. Well, joining me now is Jonathan Hall, KC, the UK's independent reviewer of terrorism legislation. People are calling for action. They want the law changed and the implementation of existing laws changed. What is possible?
Well, I think stepping back, this reminds me of one of those times, and I mean, unfortunately, many of us have lived through a few of them, where it's a national security emergency. I mean, the most recent one, I think, was 2017. And then before that, you had 2005, you had the terrible attacks on the transport system. And I think what I remember then is that the government was prepared to did say, the rules of the game have changed. And they really went for the underlying causes. I think that existing laws, of course, can be used, and the police cannot be criticised for the protection that they are trying to give to the Jewish community. But just as they went after the hateful ideologies in 2005, and they changed the law, and they were prepared to be quite assertive and aggressive, I do think the government needs to do something along those lines now. I mean, I'll give you an example of one of the things I think should be done. What law? Well, they should use the laws they've got to get rid of anti-Semites. And if people are, for example, preaching in mosques, and we know that there are people preaching in mosques, it doesn't matter, frankly, whether it's based on the Quran or not, they should look to remove people, to deport people. They should make the straightforward argument that if you want to live in this country, you cannot be anti-Semitic. And they should use the many, many tools that are available to the government. I mean, I regret to say that I think that the amount of Iran-type language, death to the IDF, globalise the intifada that we've seen on the streets, is now at such a pitch, and it has painted a target on the backs of Jews and Israelis living here. And so if the government was to be really creative and they were prepared to take risky and unpopular moves, they might, for example, say, when you've got a national emergency with repeated attacks on Jews, on Brits, let's be honest, on Brits, then there should be perhaps even a moratorium on marches while those same slogans keep on being repeated day after day. And
so
I don't say
you'd
this
stop
lightly, because of course
the pro-Palestine, anti-Israel marches in London every week, would you?
I think that the government needs to consider that. I mean, and I think that needs to take some unpopular and tough positions.
Isn't there an argument that you know, sort of clamping down on free protest, peaceful protest, for the people who are there, who are peaceful and are not shouting anti-Semitic slogans, is precisely the kind of action that extremists want to provoke?
I mean, those were the arguments which happened in 2005. So when the last Labour government said the rules of the game have changed and we're going to go after the hateful preachers, these were people who up until then had been speaking lawfully, they were peaceful, the same arguments were made. And I think the assessment was made correctly, and I think it's proven to be correct, that you can't just ignore the underlying ideologies. And I mean, I'll give you an example of what I mean by this is not necessarily a legal change, but it's part of the rhetoric that I think the government now needs to bring forward. I listened very carefully to what Sir Mark Rowley said. He talked about anti-Semitism coming from hostile states, the extreme right and the extreme left. He didn't even name anti-Semitism coming from some parts of the Muslim community. Now, he's a police officer. He needs political cover and bravery from politicians to spell these things out. I think only once you do that, as back in 2005 was the case, can you then start to prepare a really full spectrum response? Because, I mean, going back to the point, this is now, I think, at a level of a national security emergency.
Jonathan Hall, thank you very much indeed. Well, joining me now is Sarah Sackman, the MP for Golders Green and a Justice Minister, and we saw the video of you, in the streets in Golders Green with the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, and you felt that anger. Do you feel that that is representative of the wider community?
Well, I'm not just the local MP here, and I engage with my constituents, with local synagogues and other community groups all the time. I'm also a member of the Jewish community. And I can safely say that the fear and the anxiety, and yes, indeed, the anger that we have heard today is absolutely real, and understandably so, because we have seen the intensification of threats and attacks on Jews. My thoughts today are with the 2 victims of this attack who were attacked simply because they are Jewish. So that level of anger and fear is unsurprising.
But they were calling on you to resign, weren't they? So they were trying to express their anger at the government, at what they say is your failure to act. Do you feel that is fair criticism?
Look, I understand people's frustrations, and I'm not going to seek to minimize people's pain and anger. But I would also refute the suggestion, any suggestion, that the government is sitting on its hands. As soon as I heard about today's incident, I met with the Home Secretary. I've been on the phone to the Prime Minister, who's just come out of a COBRA meeting. And it's right that COBRA should have been convened, because this is urgent. This is incredibly deadly serious, and I use those words deliberately. The government has invested in my local area in a major uplift in policing, and indeed it was that police presence today that prevented an even worse outcome. We had police very quickly on the scene, working together with local volunteers, security volunteers, Hatzolah. They tasered the perpetrator, they apprehended him, and that's because they were present and have been present in this community for weeks.
You will have just heard Jonathan Hall, coming up with some ideas about things you could do, laws you could change and action you could take. In particular, he supports banning the pro-Palestine, anti-Israel marches. Do you support that now?
Well, I think we need to look at this emergency in the round. He's right to say that these incidents have not come up in a vacuum. Anti-Semitism, by the way, as well as being the oldest form of hatred.
But can you address the question sort of head on? What do you think about banning the marches?
I'm just coming to that. We have to tackle this at root. We have to get to grips.
Do you want to ban the marches?
The culture of and look. I called previously for the ban of the Al-Quds March, and the Home Secretary responded. We have brought forward laws to tackle the cumulative effect of protests outside places of worship. We have to look again at whether our public order regime is fit for purpose. We've asked for Ken McDonald to do some of that work. We do need to look again. I don't want to see the tolerant values that I think characterize Britain. The freedom to protest is part of that tolerance. I don't want to see that diminished, but we do at the same time have to do whatever it takes to tackle the culture of hate out of which these dangerous behaviours emerge.
And just briefly, I'm sorry to rush you, but what about the enforcement of existing law? Jonathan also said, you should be deporting radical preachers and targeting people, what's going on within the Muslim community, he said. Do you agree with that?
Well, of course I agree. Those who preach
why
hate,
isn't it being done?
Those who incite violence should feel the full force of the law. Of course I agree with that. And the problem of Islamist extremism is one that we need to name. But so too, as I said, anti-Semitism takes many forms. And the anti-Semitism that exists on the hard right, on the hard left, is also a feature here. Some of this is state-backed, some of this is homegrown. But as to his suggestion that we should be enforcing, and actually if you see some of the changes we've seen to charity laws to clamp down on things that claim to be charities, but are basically fronts for hate and funding for hate, of course we should. I want to see us be even more active in that space. He's right.
Sarah Sackman, thank you very much indeed for your time.